Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Network Spotlight, Utah Family Strengthening Network, provided by the National Family Support Network. Slide. Thank you. I am Lakeisha Ross, and I am the Membership and Events Consultant at NFSN, and I will be your moderator for today, along with my wonderful co-moderator, Mary Robinson Griffey, who will also be helping me today. If you are joining us online, you may listen directly through your computer speakers. If you have joined via the phone number that Zoom provided, your line has been muted to minimize background noise. For those of you online, please note the link in the Dropbox folder in the chat. Here you will see that there are some handouts available for download. In addition, you may put questions in the question section at any time. The chat section is open for you to include any comments during today's webinar, but we ask that you direct all your questions to the Q&A section of the Zoom. There's live tech in the room today, so if you have any technical issues, please feel free to direct message the tech in the chat box. Today's PowerPoints, handouts, and a recording of this webinar will be available on the NFSN website on the Webinar Wednesday page this time tomorrow. When you exit the webinar, an evaluation will automatically appear on your screen. We ask that you take a moment to complete this, as it provides us with valuable feedback for future webinars. All right, to get us started today, I want to see who all is in this virtual room with us. So we're going to do a few polls. The first poll that we're going to launch is going to be, where are you joining us from? Look at this map on your screen, and in just a moment, the poll will pop up and tell us, are you in the West or the Northeast, South, Midwest, or Canada, or other international? If it's other international, please get in that chat box and let me know where you're coming from. From Oakland, yay. Thanks for being here. All right, a few more seconds and then we're gonna close that poll and see who all is in the room. Utah, yay. Okay, let's close that poll and see who all is here. All right, West is showing out today. So we have the Pacific and the Mountain at 38%, so yay. And then next runner up is South, is represented with 34%, and then Midwest with 21%, and Northeast with 7%. Awesome, thank you so much for doing that poll for me. Let's close out this poll and we'll go to the next one. The next poll I'm going to ask you to answer is, what is your affiliation? What is your affiliation? So are you a family resource center, a family resource center network, other family support program, a parent leader, early care and education, or just education, government as far as child welfare, or other? And if you choose that other, put it in the chat box, or a private funder. We'll give everybody a few moments to complete this one. State network leadership, awesome. Wyoming Children's Trust Fund, yay. Okay, a couple more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's close it down and let's see who all is in the room. All right, so family resource centers are heavily represented, 40%. We have some networks at 13% and family support programs at 19%. Some educators in the room, thank you for being here. And government and child welfare, awesome. And then we have some more in the chat. Thank you so much, Memphis, Tennessee, represent, and other family support. Awesome. Okay, well, let's close this one. I have one more poll for you. I want to know, what level do you work at? What level do you work at? Are you a policy and systems level individual, management level, program and direct service, those grassroots? Which where are you? And if it's other, you know the deal, put it in the chat. South Carolina. All right, we're closing in 3, 2, 1. Okay, who's all in the room? Let's see. Okay, heavy representation from management level, 39%, the program and direct service, 36%, and some policies and systems level. And then we had some others with nonprofit organizations. We had some management and state leadership. So thank you all so much for being in this virtual room with us today. I hope you get some wonderful stuff from these wonderful presenters that we have lined up for you. And at this time, I am going to pass it to Mary.
All right, thank you so much, Lakeisha. So founded in 2011 by 8 state networks, the National Family Support Network has quadrupled in size over the last decade and now has 38 member networks. And those include 37 states and the District of Columbia. And collectively, they represent more than 3,000 family resource centers, which serves more than 2 million people annually. The mission of the National Family Support Network is to promote positive outcomes for all children, families, and communities by leveraging the collective impact of state family resource center networks and championing quality family support and strengthening practices and policies. Our vision, in short, well, it's that whole map you just saw will be green, and that will ensure that all families will have access to quality family support services in their communities. And that will be through family resource centers that are supported by strong networks. So I just want to give you a little overview, a roadmap of our webinar today. We're going to start with a brief introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about family resource center networks. Then I'm going to turn the baton over to the Utah Family Strengthening Network, who's here to present today. We'll follow that with some Q&A. We'll then do some NFSN resources and opportunities. And finally, we'll end our webinar with that evaluation as you're leaving the webinar space. So thousands of family resource centers have emerged organically across the country. And yet their existence is still largely under the radar as what we call America's best kept secret. A family resource center is a community or a school-based welcoming hub of support, services, and opportunities that are all designed to support families to be strong and successful. They may be community-based, like the image that you see here on the slide on the left, which is of a family resource center in Vermont, or they may be school-based, like the image you see on the right from the state of Kentucky. Now, when we look one level up, we talk about family resource centers and how they're connected. So not only have cities, counties, and states hit upon the value of FRCs, but they've also hit upon the value of networking them together, talking about family resource center networks. And what we're talking about is a network of at least 2 or more family resource centers that have come together. These networks help ensure coordinated quality support for families, and they serve as the backbone entity to leverage and coordinate the collective impact of their members. These family resource center networks differ by structure from network to network. So they can either be an independent nonprofit, they might be coordinated by a public or private funder, or they could be led by a group of family resource center directors who are serving in a volunteer capacity. Data from a national study that the National Family Support Network worked with a research institute in Colorado on shows that the most common functions of the Family Resource Center Network are increasing connectedness, coordination, cooperation, and collaboration amongst its members. They're also providing training and technical assistance. They're working on advocacy, policy, and legislation, and providing and maintaining a shared data tracking system. And when we talk about Family Resource Center networks, we're going to look at them through two different lenses. That first lens is the stages of the network development, and then that second lens will be the types of networks. So with the stages of network development, we talk about three different stages. We see here emerging, and that's when you're first getting started. It's determining who will be at the table and what you want to focus on. And this typically happens from that birth of the network to that 3-year period. Then you see evolving, which is that 3 to 4 year mark of development. And as the network is being further developed, they might hire a contractor or first staff, and the network begins to have more structure and capacity to do more. Finally, we see established, and that's where the network has typically been around for at least 5 years. They have staffing and a track record of activities. And an interesting characteristic of these types of networks is that they have weathered crisis and they've decided to stick together. Finally, let's look at that other lens, that types of networks, where we see volunteer coordinated. That's where it's led by Family Resource Center directors themselves in voluntary leadership positions without any paid network staff. Examples of that would be the state of New Hampshire and West Virginia. Then you see funder coordinated, and that's led by a public department or foundation that both funds and convenes the centers. Examples of that would be the state of New York and the state of Nevada. Finally, you see independent nonprofits, where a staffed independent nonprofit organization functions as a membership alliance, and the members are paying dues. These networks may raise and distribute funds and function as an intermediary, sorry about that, or they may not. And examples of that would be the state of Colorado and the state of Maryland. So now it's time to get the meat of our presentation today, and I have the privilege of introducing our presenters from Utah. We have Deandra Brown with us. She's the project administrator with the Utah Family Strengthening Network. And we also have Margie Woodruff, who is the executive director for the Family Support Centers of Utah. And I'm going to turn things over to Deandra.
Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Deandra Brown, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you today and share with you some of the wonderful things happening here in the state of Utah. The Utah Family Strengthening Network came about because of a handful of very passionate individuals who wanted to further the work of strengthening families in Utah. The network was, until quite recently, entirely volunteer-based. One of the original founders of our network is Deb Comstock, who many of you know due to her incredible work in Utah and California, and of course, nationally. She's done a lot over the years to further the work of protective factors and standards in Utah. It was an early priority for the network and its founding members to have several trainers trained in the 5 protective factors. Eventually, several of the volunteers were also trained as standards trainers. And you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And an early supporter of the importance of protective factors and strengthening families was the prevention team of our State Division of Child and Family Services. This led to an important relationship and partnership that has continued to evolve and expand over the years. A member of the Division of Child and Family Services prevention team then moved from that state agency over to the Utah State Board of Education and took her passion for protective factors into her new role. And this led to creative thinking about protective factors in our schools and with our students. In 2020, the nonprofit organization Prevent Child Abuse Utah, which is part of the Prevent Child Abuse America Network, joined our Utah network as a member and as a partner. Prevent Child Abuse Utah's executive director, Laurianne Thorpe, was a supporter of the protective factors from her time serving as a member of the Utah State Board of Education, and she fully understood the need for Prevent Child Abuse Utah to be involved in the movement and in the Utah Strengthening Family Network. With the involvement of Prevent Child Abuse Utah, the network recognized the need to move from entirely volunteer-based to a more sustainable model. So to continue moving forward, they would need to establish a paid position to act in the best interests of the network as a whole. And that's where my role comes in. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about me, what brought me to this work. My training is entirely in piano performance and music from the Juilliard School in New York City. So I spent many years there training as well with my 4 other brothers and sisters. We all play the piano. And we formed a musical group named the Five Browns. And we all play on 5 Steinways, as you can see in this photo, in concerts around the world and have recorded albums and things of that nature. So you might wonder, how am I involved and invested in this work? Well, I am also a survivor of child sexual abuse and physical abuse. And due to the public nature of my musical life and later my advocacy as a survivor of abuse, I realized that once my story hit the press that I had a decision to make about my life and what it would look like moving forward. And I decided to share my experiences in an effort to help others. So in 2014, I personally advocated before the Utah State Legislature for a law that would allow child abuse prevention curriculum to be taught in Utah schools. The bill was nearly dead because legislators here didn't understand the importance of this topic and were nervous about talking about abuse. The bill's sponsor flat out cold called me, asking if I consider sharing my personal experiences and perspective with legislators and in a public forum. So she saw strength and a glimmer of something in me that I had yet to discover in myself. The bill went on to pass, and since then, countless students, teachers, and parents across Utah have received this important education. And this is my first interaction with Prevent Child Abuse Utah, and they have always been, since 2014 and before, the largest provider of this prevention education across Utah. And I am a strong believer in them and their mission and the programs that they bring forth to help strengthen families. So through my experiences as a survivor and advocating for children and victims' rights, I realized quite early on that agencies and organizations across Utah were doing important work, but their work was siloed and each was unaware of the extent of the amazing things the others were doing. So I was involved in co-founding the Utah Coalition for Protecting Childhood to help bring state agencies, state legislators, private organizations, experts on child abuse and neglect, and community members with the united goal of working together to better support families. I continue to advocate in Utah for the protection of children from child abuse, as well as other victims' rights and issues. Working on legislation has become an important part of my life that I could have never expected. Next slide, please. So in 2022, the network decided it was time to push their goals forward and look towards creating a paid position. So through the creative thinking of the Division of Child and Family Services, Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Services Administrator, along with our network members, the state approved CBCAP funding to be granted to Prevent Child Abuse Utah in September of 2022 to be used for a family strengthening network project administrator. This grant opportunity came about through the American Rescue Plan Act funding. So a few of the important pieces, this new position can help strengthen you see on the screen before you. This position became my job, and I am so excited to continue to move these efforts forward. And you can see all the wonderful collaboration that can come about when you have dedicated staff able to help with these endeavors. Next slide. So membership up to this point has been based on self-identification and those who have come to the network with a desire to volunteer. So as a network and with the help of my specific role, we're able to we're in the process of reworking our membership criteria, our dues and benefits to help make the network self-sustainable, even after the CBCAP funding is the grant cycle completes. To better solidify the stability of the network and the project administrator position, the network has a fiscal sponsorship agreement with Prevent Child Abuse Utah. And this allows for just better statewide funding efforts and greater flexibility for network activities moving forward. So other members of the network include, we have Family Support Centers of Utah, United Way of Utah County, and other family support providers across the state. And we have other organizations on the horizon that we hope to bring on board very soon. Next slide. So a little bit about our structure. The full Utah Strengthening Network meets quarterly for meetings, and it consists of no more than 15 members and no fewer than 4 members. And it's comprised of at least 1 representative from Division of Child and Family Services and 3 representatives from each of the subcommittees, the 3 subcommittees that you can see at the bottom of the slide: membership, protective factors, and standards. So 3 representatives from each of those subcommittees. So just, I mean, we function as a majority of network members when they're in attendance. A majority, simple majority counts in terms of voting, and any prospective members that want to be proposed need to come from the subcommittees and then are voted on by the full network. Just a little bit about these subcommittees. First, you have the Advisory Leadership Committee, and that also meets monthly. And among many of their activities and responsibilities, they provide leadership around the structure and the governance of the network. And they also act as authorized signers for any disbursement requests that come through the fiscal sponsor. They also they lead and compile the info needed for the state snapshot for NFSN and serve as the point of contact for the national network. The leadership committee is made up of the 3 chairs, as you can see on the slide, of the subcommittees: the membership, protective factors, and standards. And each of the 3 chairs, and I think this has worked well for us, each of the 3 chairs rotate leading these monthly network meetings, which gives each the opportunity to help and lead the network. The Protective Factors Subcommittee also meets monthly, and they advise the leadership committee on what needs to happen with protective factor trainings. They provide approved versions of the protective factor trainings to trainers, and also guidelines of how often the training should take place across the state. This subcommittee also provides oversight of the protective factors trainers and reviews data and makes recommendations as needed for changes in the trainings. And then the standards subcommittee, they also meet monthly, and some of their responsibilities, as you can imagine, they advise the leadership on anything related to standards trainings and standards in general. This group is also required to be up to date on all the requirements of being certified standards trainers. They participate and help carry out the responsibilities for promoting and engaging prospective participants of the standards trainings and searching out new groups and organizations that can be standards trained. They check in regularly with our standards trainers and offer training and tech support as needed. And they also, at the end of each training, will review the evaluations that come in to discuss ways to better support our trainers in their skills and in their reach. And then, of course, the membership subcommittee, they also meet monthly, and they create a design for the growth of the network and formulate ways to put it in motion for our membership. They define what the membership and the benefits will look like and create a framework so that we can help identify new members moving forward. The subcommittee supports member retention and engagement and really dives into how we can continue to move those efforts moving forward. The subcommittee, they advise the program administrator, me, with the following coordinating activities for outreach, recruitment, membership, processing, renewals, all those kinds of things, member events, so that we can keep our statewide efforts moving forward in the way that we would hope to. Next slide, please. So when a strong network is able to combine their efforts and their passion with a paid position, we found there to be many benefits. In my role as project administrator, I'm able to help the network in connecting and convening other family resource centers across the state. My position has helped broaden the efforts across Utah and helps to promote a unified message moving forward so that we're all speaking the same language and same terminology and pooling our efforts in a unified way. I also help coordinate the trainings, as you can imagine, the protective factors and the standards. We have many various groups across the state who are trained in protective factors specifically, and also in standards. And so we want to make sure that that the network is a clearinghouse for all these trainings across the state moving forward. And my role also helps in furthering stronger partnerships with greater cooperation and strengthens the outlook and the longevity of the network and its goals moving forward. And the combination of my role in a supporting and encouraging network has already led to several training and conference sessions dedicated specifically to network perspectives. So just to list a few, Joining Forces Conference is presented by Prevent Child Abuse Utah. And for multiple years now, they have a strong focus on protective factors and standards as the overarching message of the conference. And the next one with this focus is coming up next month. We are participating in and presenting in the Utah State Board of Education Prevention Summit, which has an entire conference coming up in June dedicated entirely to the protective factors, which is incredible. It's exciting for us to see school counselors from around the state learning about the protective factors and how they can tailor this work of protective factors in their work with children and families, and how it can enhance their ability to help these individuals. And we're also going to be presenting at the Utah Public Health Association conference. And this is a brand new audience for us to introduce the protective factors to, a group of public health administrators. And we look forward to helping them understand the need for a strengths-based approach when they're working with children and with families. And it's pretty exciting for us to take this message to a group that we haven't worked with before, and to think broader and how we can see more groups and demographics across the state understanding the protective factors and the benefits they can have on families. Next slide, please. So one of our network's integral members is the Family Support Centers of Utah. And there are centers and nurseries across the state, and they function as a wonderful partner for the network and bring so much knowledge and experience to the table. They truly function as a network within a network. And it's something that I think is important for other networks to understand how networks within networks can partner and pool their efforts and have a stronger effect together as well as individually. So at this point, I'd like to turn the time over to my good friend, Margie, who will tell you a bit more about the Family Support Centers.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Deandra. I appreciate that wonderful introduction, and I consider you a good friend as well. So thank you very much. So I want to thank everybody for this opportunity to present information about the Family Support Centers of Utah, where I serve as the executive director. We really value our participation with the Utah Family Strengthening Network. I serve there as the chair of the membership committee and as a member of that 3-team leadership group that Deandra mentioned. I've spent my entire career working with nonprofit organizations, both statewide, local, and national. And I'm really pleased to be with Family Support Centers of Utah. As Deandra mentioned, we have 11 family support centers throughout the state with 17 crisis respite nurseries. Our state office is located in Salt Lake City, where I am right now. So my presentation is going to focus on the Family Support Centers of Utah, which I'll refer to many times as the statewide network or statewide office, because that's a mouthful to keep saying that. Family Support Centers of Utah over and over. But my presentation hopefully will provide some nuggets of information that you all can use if you are overseeing a network, if you are an individual organization, because we're going to talk a lot about fundraising and about creating community partners. Next slide, please. Always keep the mission of your organization front and center. It's really more important than you could ever imagine. We created a 5-year strategic plan just recently with the goals and strategy that align with that mission in that first box. It took about 8 months to complete. And the reason it took so long is that we wanted to get input from all of our stakeholders, especially those executive directors from the 11 centers. And so we were getting, we felt like by getting that information, from those 11 center directors, it would determine the best ways to support the statewide network, which is that second box. Okay, so the executive directors of the centers, not the statewide organization, but of those centers that make up our network, meet on a monthly basis as an advisory group. The directors also serve on the 4 committees that represent the state board of directors. We ask each director to complete a really comprehensive needs assessment. Once about every 2 years, but we update it every year for the next fiscal year. So the results of the needs assessment, the first one we did in 2019, showed us the top priorities unanimously from every board, every center director. It was to increase wages and benefits for employees. Our turnover was just horrendous. Recruiting, retaining staff was horrible. And so the board took that to heart, and we really looked at ways to raise funds so that we could raise those the wages for our employees who work so hard. Not just the workers that take care of children, but our leadership staff as well. So we were able to do that, and the new needs assessment, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the new needs assessment is going to be going out next week. And we will look at what those priorities are in that new needs assessment. In my my prediction is that because Utah is such a fast growing state, we're going to see a lot of requests for increased services and programs throughout Utah. I think that's probably what we'll see, as well as keeping up with the cost of living adjustments for staff. Next slide, please. Okay, so the family support centers, as I mentioned, are located throughout the state. They're really strategically placed in that way, and you could see where some of those centers are covering a lot of counties. So the reason I could make that prediction about what our needs assessment is going to show is because I know how fast we're growing. And I've also heard from the executive directors that we truly do need to add services in some of the counties that have a lot of growth. There are 4 core services that every center provides, and those are the crisis respite nurseries, the parent education, 24-hour referrals, and family strengthening activities. Additional services are also provided based on the needs of the community. We may see that the way we provide support will change in the future. We could be keeping our crisis respite nurseries where they are, but looking at strengthening some of our community partnerships so that we may be providing parent education in a county that we don't have a crisis respite nursery, or in school programs. So it may look different in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, aligning with the National Family Support Network is important, not only to the Family Support Centers of Utah, but the Utah Family Strengthening Network that Deandra talked about. Like them, we promote positive outcomes for all children, families, and communities. We leverage the collective impact of our family support centers throughout the state. And we champion quality family support and strengthening practices in strengthening the practices and policies. We support the protective factors framework, and I encourage every organization to take the training on completing on the protective factors training. And we also believe really strongly that the standards of qualities are essential in so many ways. It's a tool for planning, providing, assessing quality practice, and the standards integrate and operationalize the principles of family support practice and strengthening families. And I think what's important to many of you is that the standards are research-based, evidence-based, research-based, evidence-informed, and that's really important to many of you. As you can see on the slide, the state license actually requires all the staff to take protective factors, but we have asked all of the employees to take standards of quality training as well. That was completed last year. We continue to provide training to that team of 3 to 5 people and new staff as they come in. And we've also asked that the standards of quality self-assessment be completed by June 30th. We've gone as far as hiring a program liaison who is working with the executive directors of each of the centers to complete that standards of quality self-assessment. Next slide. Okay, so Deandra spoke about moving the UFSN from a volunteer-based program to paid staff. And Deandra's just a perfect person as the project administrator. I mean, we're so fortunate to have her on board. And when I talk about finding the right person, I don't want you to get the impression that time being that I've done all of the work that have accomplished on my own. So I'm not going to be boastful about that because it really was a group effort. The benefits of investing in the right person can lead your organization to catapult you to the next level. So, having somebody like Deandra, I have full trust that she can help us do that in the Utah Family Strengthening Network. So Family Support Centers was led by our center directors from 2005 to 2019. It was more like a support group. And they did hire a couple of directors of development trying to get funding. But I think that they realized that at some point they were going to have to hire an executive director to build a strong organization with a solid infrastructure. And they couldn't be the board anymore because it was a conflict of interest for them to raise funds and then distribute the funds, as you can imagine. Once I was hired in 2019, we moved from a volunteer-led based board of directors to a community-based board of up to 15 members. We have 13 right now. We began to identify the greatest needs of the centers and raise funds to support them. We created a 5-year strategic plan. We've also expanded employees in the office of the executive director, which is my office. Since 2019, a total of $7,147,000 has been raised. Most significantly is that last one you'll see on the very last section, where it says 3.4 million awarded in ongoing state funding. State funding is extremely difficult to get because it is from the governor's budget. And I will say it was a team effort. We had the wonderful Representative Dan Johnson from the northern part of our state as our champion, and we had a fantastic executive director, Cheryl Goody from the Family Place in Logan, as well as our executive directors, and most importantly, the full board of directors. Next slide. Okay, we're going to talk about funding and tips for working with the legislature and just donors in general. Hopefully this information will help you as you go forward with a legislative ask. Next slide. The first section is about working with the legislature. If you plan to make a financial request to the legislature, start early. That's the best advice I could give you. Start early. Find a legislator that will champion your request. That legislator becomes your insider. Just like I talked about Dan Johnson, who is a representative in Northern Utah, he would tell us things that were so important. And we communicated often. Including what the key issues are in the upcoming session. We met him for lunch on Friday, and the session is just completed, but he said mental health was important this session, and it will continue next session. That was a really good piece of advice. We also spent a lot of time before we actually made our request working individually with elected officials. We met with the lieutenant governor. We invited the legislators to meet as committees in our centers. We had many tours with our legislators, and you work with the decision makers one-on-one, invite them to lunch, invite along with one of your board members, and also just keep engaging those board members. So you see those 5 points on the slide, and we'll talk more about that in upcoming slides. But that's a little tip for working with legislators. So we'll go in a little bit more detail in just a couple of minutes. Next slide. Okay. So what worked well? I think when we worked with the legislators, we also worked with the financial advisors to the legislators. And we were getting guidance as we were preparing materials. And they said the best advice they gave us is to bear in mind that they have about 2 minutes to look at your supporting documentation. So make it concise. Think about that 2 minutes and what they will see. You want to have strong outcomes that demonstrate your success. They don't appreciate, any funder doesn't really appreciate your estimates or any ambiguity. I think stories, emotional stories, are really important, but don't make that your primary part of your request. You want to touch the hearts of human beings. These are legislators are wonderful people individually to work with, and think about them that way. Don't think about them as the group. They want to hear your success stories, but you also have to realize that you are making a financial request. Have your strategic plan in place if you have one. They really appreciate a well-structured organization with a strong strategic plan. That really goes a long way. And make sure that you're getting input from those that are in your network. Next slide. Okay, so as you can see from this slide, our request for to the legislature was built on 3 priorities: provide, implement, support. Requesting funds from your network should also identify your priorities. It seems really simple, but in fact, there's a lot involved with each of those priorities. For example, we'll just take the first one: provide staff training and ongoing support. That is really, we created that needs assessment that we talked about, and we looked at our the support that the board of directors and myself could give to the centers, and we created a comprehensive fundraising plan based on those top priorities. We encourage fundraising at the individual centers. In addition, we serve as advocates for the statewide network, and we collect data that will strengthen our network as well. So you'll see in there, there's a lot that is involved with that. And if you pull it apart, you're going to see that what we have as our priorities is part of our strategic plan as well. Okay, our next slide is just an example of investing now for future savings. Does the service you all provide, does that save tax dollars? Do funders understand the impact of trauma and the importance of addressing trauma early? Research that information. Check with the National Family Support Network for resources, and by all means, highlight that information. Next slide. This is the front page of the promotional material that we sent. We gave to the centers. There's also a piece that they look at that's pretty consistent, and that's the request for appropriations. That was submitted by our state representative, but this is just kind of an add-on, and you'll see all of those key components that I just talked about are in that one page. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here next slide with the importance of expanding partnerships. Okay, so I think with Family Support Centers of Utah, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned about working for my organization, as well as our statewide organization that Deandra spoke about, is that the importance of expanding partnerships, of being open to possibilities, knowing that, you know, definitely Family Support Centers of Utah could move along the path to add more members to our network. But I wanted us to have that opportunity to expand partnerships and to be open to the fact that there may be a different structure that works better for our state. So going back to keeping, I'm sorry, go to the next slide. Sorry. Sometimes, you know, we get really busy with our daily responsibilities, which many times includes putting out fires, but really look at ways to align partners that to find partners that align with the work that you do. Schedule time to meet with community and funding partners, engage with board members to help, share the benefits. And as I mentioned when I first started this slide, which you weren't able to look at right away, but be open to possibilities. You can enter new geographies. You can achieve greater awareness and advocacy. And look at joint programming and services. I mean, Utah, there's so many wonderful organizations in Utah that share the program and services that we do in many ways. They're not exactly alike, but they enhance us. And strong community partners can also lead to new funding opportunities. So I am going to end my time with you now. I think my 20 minutes is up, right? And thank you. And so I think I just talked to you a little bit about being open to new possibilities. So I covered my biggest one in lessons learned. We take a lot of pride in our family resource centers, individual centers, small networks, large networks, but be open to new possibilities when you look at the structure. What works best for your state? That's really what's important, because when you do that, then you're better able to serve the families and children in your state. And they really need our services. Also, am I funding?
No, yeah, I
Yeah,
will
okay.
take care of the next two bullet points.
Okay, thank you, Deandra.
Thanks, Margie. So some of the lessons learned from my perspective in my new position, I've only been in this role since October, but very excited about the direction of things. One of the top things was regarding funding. Don't be afraid to start small and be patient as you work to grow your sustainability as a network. The network needed to articulate the funding need to each other and then bring in the right people to the table to assist with the plan for the financial stability portion. So they needed to make sure that they had all the right voices to be able to carve out a solid plan moving forward. So as I mentioned earlier, funding began with the CB-CAP grant, but it's only a 2-year grant. But the network is now looking to the future and generating revenue from trainings and soon from membership fees to help with sustainability efforts. So we're excited about the direction that things are moving as a network. The second point, balancing those strong voices. So it really can, if you have the patience to balance those strong voices, it can really lead to true collaboration. The network consists of very passionate volunteers who have made strengthening families their life's work. So this has never been just a job for any of them. And I have so much respect for their passion, their devotion, and the decades of work that they've done in this area. So when my position was created, it was agreed that the project administrator role would remain neutral when voting and those sorts of decisions are concerned, and be more of a support to members of the leadership committee and each subcommittee. So we found that this works really well for us. I'm able to present various ideas or create documents and help based off of the needs of the network, but leave the voting decisions up to the committee members themselves. So as in any family with strong voices and personalities, I feel like the network is similar. It can sometimes be a challenge to find a consensus on the best path forward. But when each member makes it a priority to keep an open mind and to listen to various opinions and ideas and work together in a creative way, we have found that the end result is so much stronger and more powerful. And for our final point on the lessons learned, I'll turn it back over to Margie.
And I'm sure Deandra is not talking about me when she's talking about strong personalities. Okay, I've had a temper a couple of times, I will admit. So I think it's important for every one of us to keep our expectations high. It's okay to make training and implementation of the protective factors and standards of quality a requirement. Sometimes when I give this presentation and I say, we made it mandatory that everybody receive standards of quality training, and I see people kind of cringing like, oh, I could never ask that. Oh my goodness, it is so important. Andrew Russo, the executive director of Utah Family Strengthening Network, has worked so hard to make their program, their organization strong. His leadership is fantastic. And I really trust in his opinions and his his fortitude. I just trust that what he is presenting to us has we have all been our opinions have all been listened to. And he works really well with committees. I'm on policy committee for the national, I said Utah Family Strengthening Networks. I'm sorry, Andrew and the National Family Strengthening Network. Now you know where I'm getting all confused with these acronyms. So I want to thank Andrew. Please believe in it. Keep your expectations high. And finally, remind yourself of your mission, especially when things get tough. For me, I visualize the children and the families our centers work with, especially, like I said, when I am just like my brain's going to explode. I go back to how hard our executive directors and their staffs work with the children and the families. And all of us are working to prevent child abuse. And the Utah Family Strengthening Network is, every member, as Deandra said, is so dedicated to this. So thank you so much for listening to us. And hopefully we gave you some words of wisdom and some nuggets you can take with you. And we are just we would be very honored if you reached out to us with questions and needed more clarification. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Margie. Next slide. And here is our contact info. And as Margie said, we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, any brainstorming that your network is going through, we're happy to answer in any way possible. And I think we will turn the time back to our national friends who are gonna head us into a Q&A session. If any of you have questions for us, go ahead and pop them in the Q&A. And thank you, Lakeisha. We're happy to have your help to answer these questions. Thanks.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, ladies. That was wonderful hearing your stories. So yes, everyone, at this time, we would like to save some space for Q&As. So if you have any questions, there is that box for Q&As. Put all your questions in that box, just in case. If we don't get to them, then someone else will answer. Someone from the NFSN team will answer it for you outside of here. So please put any questions, any comments that you would like in the Q&A section at this time so that we can jump into those and present those to the ladies. And as we give everybody time, since at this time I pulled up the Q&A, I don't see any questions in the box right now. At this time, Mary, could you go ahead and push us through NFSN highlights and everything, and then we'll come back to the Q&A section to give everybody time to put information in the box?
Mary, you are muted.
Sorry, I noticed I was muted. I apologize for that. We just want to provide you with some resources that are available to you through the national network, so that you just have them available to tuck in your tool belt, and perhaps refer back to for a future date. First one I'd like to mention is, and I encourage you to check out that Webinar Wednesday page. There you're going to be able to see on that general page our upcoming webinars. As you noticed, on April 5th, we have an overview of the standards of quality for family strengthening and support coming up. And then on May 10th, we're going to have another network spotlight where we'll be featuring the South Carolina Family Resource Center Network. From that page, you can also navigate to different topics by specifically going to subpages. So we encourage you to check that out, where you can learn about all different kinds of things, and you have our library to refer to. We keep recent webinars on there. Core webinars are available, and then for specific areas. Next, I want to mention our standard certification training, and we got great shout outs from Utah about the importance of that training. We typically offer that on the 4th Thursday and Friday of each month. And our next available one for registration is April the 27th and 28th. And registration is due by April the 17th. That allows us time to get that training manual to you in the mail. You can find that information on the homepage of the National Family Support Network.org. If you go there, you'll actually see a little link where you can click to go to the registration and register for that or any future training. Another thing I'd like to mention that is in the standards, we talk about the value of parent voice and involving parents in a meaningful way. And the Developing and Sustaining Effective Parent Advisory Committees training is a unique and highly rated virtual training for program staff, which maximizes the great potential of parent advisory committees. This training is co-trained by an NFSN staff member as well as a national parent leader. You can see our upcoming dates listed here on the slide are April 20th and 21st, with registration closing on April the 18th. And then the next one will be June 27th and 28th, with registration closing by June the 15th. Again, you can find those registration links on the homepage of the NFSN website. Some other resources we have available are, we have many FRC overviews, research reports, sample RFPs, evaluation plans, videos, and information about data management systems. We have a section, if you go to About Us on the website, you can find snapshots for all our member networks, which provides a great deal of information on those networks. And then you can also find standards of quality for family strengthening and support information. I'd also like to mention our Family Resource Center Network Hub. It has tools for networks and includes both NFSN templates as well as documents from member networks that can be used as examples for FRC networks and funders of FRCs. Now there's two different sections to this hub. You're going to find network tools specifically for family resource centers, where you'll find things like identification surveys, evaluation frameworks, requests for proposals, and that type of thing. And you'll also see a section where you can find network tools specifically designed to be used by networks, such as membership agreements, job descriptions, operating guidelines, and that type of thing. So to access this, you would go to the National Family Support Network.org. Hover over that family support drop down to Family Resource Center Networks, and there you'll find it on that page right at the bottom. And then finally, we have some services available to you through the National Family Support Network, such as facilitation. We like to facilitate connections to member networks. We present for key stakeholders, such as education leaders, child welfare leaders, children's trust funds, and other public and private funders about working with and investing in family resource centers. You know, sometimes it helps to have someone with you to present to key stakeholders. So let us know if that's a resource that we can help you with. We also provide technical assistance for Family Resource Center network development. And we provide a couple of different trainings that I mentioned previously, that standard certification training and the developing and sustaining effective parent advisory committees training. And on this slide, I've provided you with the contact information for Lakeisha. She's our membership and events consultant, and you can feel free to reach out to her at this contact information. And now I will turn things back over to Lakeisha.
Thank you so much, Mary. All right, so we're going to go back to this Q&A section, ladies. Tech, if you can spotlight our presenters, because I have a couple of questions for them. All right, ladies. So the first question that's in the QA box is, what is the difference between a family support center and other family services agencies? What makes it distinct? Whoever would like to jump in and answer that.
Well, I think I could speak to the family support centers, and specifically is that, as I mentioned in the presentation, we are a specific network that is actually part of the larger Utah Family Strengthening Network, if you look at it that way. So within our organization, we have a structure that includes family support centers. Other family service or agencies have different programs and services that are unique to them. So, Deandra, do you want to add on to that?
No, I think this is one of my top goals in my role with the network, is to further identify, and this sort of blends into the second question, are there FRCs or FSCs that are not part of the network, and how do we interface and interact with them? This is one of my biggest priorities, is I want to, since we all only have a certain amount of bandwidth as volunteers, my role can help facilitate, connecting some of those individuals and organizations who are doing these, having these services offered already and are already doing the work. And just they haven't been identified as a key partner quite yet. So I think there's a lot that we're excited to continue to push forth and identify more of these networks. And really, I think it will help in terms of the unification of our message that I was mentioning, to be able to see, more areas of the state partners brought into the network. So I think even in a longer term network like Utah is, where it's been around for a little while, I look forward to continue to diving into those pieces that we can further expand. And I'm excited to see what's going to come over the next while.
And thank you, Audrey. I really appreciate that question. I would say that one of the roles of the membership subcommittee is to help Deandra identify who those other organizations and agencies are in Utah. So our first step is that we have developed a survey. That's a very simple survey, and it's going to be sent to organizations to self-identify whether or not they are a family resource center. We've included the definition of what a family resource center, and they simply answer just, I think there's 4 questions, and then we follow up with the information. The other part of the membership subcommittee is developing benefits. What are the benefits of belonging to this statewide network? So those really lie in the committee that I chair, and Deandra and our committee has been working really hard on moving this forward. It's one of those areas that's kind of lagged a bit over time, but we believe we have the structure in place to move it ahead.
Thank you so much, ladies. Okay, the last question that we have, excuse me. It's very apparent that current integrated family system is inspired. Can you further discuss the behavioral and mental health support, e.g., discuss your therapy groups, management, and progress?
Okay, so thank you for the compliment, Louis. That was very nice of you to say. And we appreciate all the little hearts you're giving us and all the thumbs up and the hand claps. That's really appreciated. Okay, so we do you further discuss the behavioral and mental health supports like therapy groups and management progress. So I would say that there are some centers that within our network of family support centers of Utah that have in-house therapy programs. So they offer therapy for parents and children through play therapy, and they're extremely effective. So some of the larger centers offer a full program in Salt Lake, and Orem is an example. Logan is another. Those are 3 larger cities. But then we also have, we may have a smaller team at some of the rural centers or smaller centers where there might be one therapist that works for that center. They may actually be the executive director and a therapist. And then there are some that we just refer to outside therapists. So it just depends on the size and what the community needs. One of the most successful programs that has happened before I entered the picture was that we had funds set aside to help parents afford to see a therapist in some of our rural areas, or we contracted with a therapy group. And we were able to pay for that contract and have families and children get services outside. I think one of the most important parts that isn't really so much therapy is parent education, because we strengthen families through that parent education. And on the slide where I have the, just our collateral piece that we sent to the legislators, that has some really good stats on how effective parent education has been in strengthening relationships and parenting skills. So I hope that answered your question, Louis. Please feel free to reach out to me if you need any other information. Anybody want to add to that? Okay.
Thank you so much, Margie. That was amazing. So ladies, we appreciate that you have shared your wisdom with all of us today. I just want to take this moment to remind participants that at the end of this webinar, it will pop up an evaluation, and we would love for them to complete that evaluation, because we do take into consideration everything that is shared through those evaluations. So we just want to take the time right now to say thank you to all our participants for joining us and sharing those questions, and please be on the lookout for the next webinar Wednesday so that you can join us again and learn more. We have these all the time on Webinar Wednesday. So if that is all, then thank you ladies so much, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.